Courtney.
I'm Brian.
And this is The Primary Nerd. Welcome back, everyone, to The Primary Nerd. I'm Courtney. I'm joined by my co-host, Brian.
Hello, everybody.
Which we had some amazing feedback on our last episode. But one of the things that people consistently asked was, is that your dad?
Yes, I am.
Yes. So apologies for not making that more clear. I am his oldest daughter.
One of four wonderful, beautiful, smart, intelligent women. So
he's a very blessed man.
Yes, I am.
So we are undertaking this adventure together. We got some other really good feedback. So one of them was to sit closer to the microphone so there's not an echo. So we've already got that in play. One was for me to talk slower. That's a personal problem. I've always had that issue. I will do my very best, but I get excited.
Yeah, you're excitable. I mean, history is your passion, so it's okay to get excited every now and then.
And sometimes my brain races, so I will try to slow it down, or at least try to link my thoughts in a better way.
There you go.
Dad, do you want to talk about what we did for our pod lab?
Sure. Yeah, we have actually, I have done sound with bands for years, and so I love working with live music, and recording was kind of the next step for me to get into. So we've made a little recording cabinet here, more or less, where we can just enjoy talking about history in this, like, it's almost like the...
it's like a cocoon.
Yeah, I was going to say it's the cone of silence, like from Get Smart.
It is. It is kind of.
So, no, it's good. And so, yeah, we're enjoying doing this. It's a new adventure for both of us, so...
Well, one of those adventures has been you setting up our website.
That is true. Yeah, and that was an interesting adventure as well. So, yes, for those of you who would like to see our website, it is the primarynerd.com, and there's also an email link on that website to our email, which is theprimarynerdpodcast@gmail.com. So please feel free to send ideas for anything you'd like us to talk about or any feedback. We appreciate it. We just want to enjoy, but we also want to give you a good product. So any kind of feedback to help us to improve and get better, we appreciate it.
Well, and I mean, there's so many different topics for us to talk about, but, I love to know what other people. So my sister Taylor actually gave me a couple amazing ideas while she was here over Thanksgiving. Mm-hmm. So I'm really looking forward to diving into some of those topics that I wouldn't have otherwise even thought about until she brought it to my attention. Mm-hmm. So then I did want to talk about, so Dad obviously is doing kind of more the technical side, the music, the website. And for me, I'm doing a good deal of the research, creating the notes and that sort of thing. When it comes to an episode release timeline, I do work full-time. I also have 2 children. So I'm going to do my very best. I would like to release episodes once every 2 weeks. If I could do it once a week, I absolutely would. I'd like to work myself up to that. But to be realistic, I think it's fair to say there'd be an episode once every 2 weeks, didn't you say?
You are a very busy young woman with a husband and 2 small children, yes.
And a more than full-time job.
More than full-time, yes. I would say that to be able to, I mean, she has compiled a lot of information here, folks. I mean, in fact, we have a board behind us that we were just trying to get everything put on so we could actually kind of streamline. There's so much information that we want to talk about. And so
Would you say that there is a Titanic size amount of information?
At least.
At least.
Yes. If anything, you're very thorough when you prepare for something, especially when it comes to history. So, we're 2 weeks, once every 2 weeks. I could see that.
So then getting into our topic, that terrible pun might have given you a hint. We are talking about the Titanic.
Yes, the Titanic.
Which, if y'all remember from our very first episode, when we were just kind of talking about time periods that we love, and I brought up the Titanic, that I had watched that movie when I was young, and it absolutely captured my imagination. I had to know more. I thought, surely this can't be true. Surely this has to be, Hollywood fiction or whatnot. But the more you dive into the Titanic, the more you will be surprised. And even I recently went to the the Pigeon Forge Titanic Museum, and that set me off anew. And that's what really got me into the Senate inquiry hearings, which I'm not sure if you all are familiar, but after Titanic sunk, there was an inquiry in the United States. There was also an inquiry in Britain that had been done as to the causes, what occurred from on the part of the crew, some of the rumors that were circulating that they were trying to figure out, did this actually happen? And then what can we do in the future to make sure that this never happens again? So diving into the inquiries specifically is what led to this current trajectory of episodes that we are about to share with you. So it's such a huge topic, but there is an author who did an amazing job with just this great summarizing statement that I'd like to share. And this is from Lawrence Beasley. You're going to learn all about him in an upcoming episode. But for now, I'd just like to share this quote with you. The history of the RMS Titanic of the White Star Line is one of the most tragically short it is possible to conceive. The world had waited expectantly for its launching and again for its sailing, had read accounts of its tremendous size and its unexampled completeness and luxury, had felt it a matter of the greatest satisfaction that such a comfortable and above all such a safe boat had been designed and built, the quote, unsinkable lifeboat. And then in a moment, to hear it had gone to the bottom, as if it had been the veriest tramp steamer of a few hundred tons, and with it 1,500 passengers, some of them known the world over. The improbability of such a thing ever happening was what staggered humanity.
Well, yeah, that was to have 1,500 passengers lose their lives in what was what was thought of as an unsinkable ship. I mean,
And on her very first voyage.
very first. That is just, I couldn't even imagine what to be a passenger on that boat when that occurred. I can't even fathom that. I mean, it would have been so different than what I would have heard in the media and those type of things, knowing of where this business of transatlantic, the ships, the shipping lines, and the passenger fare, and just the boats being built bigger and better and faster. And
Well, and to contextualize it just a little bit, so the Titanic has a sister ship called the Olympic. They're almost exactly the same structurally. The Titanic has some extra bells and whistles, but the Olympic had a accident with, I believe it's the HMS Hawk, and that was just right off of the coast of England. It's very close to Southampton, so it's not like she was really out at sea, but those two coming into collision, 27 people died, and when the newspapers covered that incident, it was a catastrophic loss of life with 27 people.
wow.
And then to have the Titanic go with almost 1,500, you can only imagine the frenzy in the media over this.
Was this the first? Was this the most loss of life in a passenger liner?
Absolutely.
Yes.
This is known as the greatest maritime disaster. I don't know the stats on the Lusitania. I'm pretty confident the Titanic still beats out the Lusitania.
Okay. Well, there is actually we'd like to talk about a non-disputable timeline. In other words, the things that most people agree upon, where there's, I'm sorry, non-disputable. There is a lot of argument about the sinking of the Titanic, but everyone, at least we can agree on this timeline,
Yes.
this non-disputable timeline. So on Wednesday, April 10th, 1912, the Titanic sails out of Southampton, England, on her maiden voyage bound for New York, and should arrive Tuesday night. So that would be a little less than a week. It would take to get there. On Sunday, April 14th, 1912, the Titanic collides with an iceberg at approximately 11:40 p.m. And then on Monday, April 15th, at 1912, the Titanic sinks at approximately 2:20 a.m. So it sounds like there's just being non-disputable, there's only very little.
Well, and there's a reason that I said it like this, because when you start breaking down, I tried to create a quote timeline, and then as I was going through, this person puts this at this time, this puts this at this time, a lot of it is under, there's a lot of argument. There's a ton of argument. And one of the great points that they make, though, is that not everybody had a watch on them. And then, especially when you're in the middle of a disaster, people were having a hard time telling how much time something would take. And so it's an estimation, but then when you start lining up all those estimations, it can't possibly be accurate, you know. So there's a lot of argument that yes, this happened, but we don't know exactly when. And then to add on this, as the Titanic's making her way into New York, there's actually various kind of time zones, if you will, that the crew was supposed to at certain times be rolling the clocks back by like an hour. And so then it's okay, well, if someone is looking at a clock, are they looking at a clock that's been rolled back or not?
Right.
And again, I will get into all of that later, but I wanted to at least give people can at least agree on this. And out of all of our episode outlines that are up on our new handy dandy whiteboard, the majority of those episodes live between the 11:40 on Sunday night and the 2:20 a.m. on Monday.
Wow. Well, that was quite. That was just reading through some of the memoirs of some of the members or people who had been on that went through that disaster. I'm just there was so much going on that I'm really looking forward to really diving into this and learning more about just everything from the birth of the Titanic and from there through the passenger's eyes and everything that we're going to be looking at to learn more about what happened and uncover some of these some of the things you've shared with me that I've never heard. I find it very interesting.
Yes, so getting into, thank you for that segue, the birth of the Titanic. So the legend goes, Titanic's design was conceived over a glass of wine.
Wow, any cheese with that?
I would hope so. I mean, I feel like you got to have cheese with your wine.
There you go.
So it's 1907 in London. Joseph Bruce Ismay and his wife are attending a dinner that is hosted by Lord and Lady Pirret in their London home. After dinner, per the custom of the time, Lady Pirret and Mrs. Ismay retire to the drawing room, leaving Ismay and Lord Pirret to talk shop over cigars and wine. So who are these men? Dad, would you like to introduce player number one?
Player number one is Joseph Bruce Ismay. He's the chairman and managing director of the White Star Line, a British company specializing in luxurious transatlantic passenger ships.
Now, what I think's interesting is I found out this little tidbit not that long ago. Did you know that the White Star Line was not founded by Mr. Ismay?
No, I didn't know that.
So it turns out that the White Star Line was originally a shipping line that was going back and forth between England and Australia because gold had been discovered in Australia. So you've got people going over there, you know, to move and to take advantage of the gold strike. You've got trade and, you know, etc. And so the White Star Line's flagship was called the Royal Standard. It's her maiden voyage. She collides with an iceberg.
Oh, my goodness.
And was so badly damaged that she almost sunk.
Wow.
So the company goes bankrupt, and its assets, which included the company's name, the White Star Line, as well as their flag, which was still used by the RMS Titanic, were sold. Thomas Ismay purchases this in late 1867. And he starts adding on to the ships. So he starts building ships. Following Thomas Ismay's death in 1899, the leadership of the White Star Line is assumed by his son, which is our Joseph Bruce Ismay.
Wow. I mean, collided with an iceberg on her maiden voyage. Does that sound familiar?
I read that and I had to stop. It was just like, you're kidding me.
Wow.
So then in 1902, Bruce Ismay reaches an agreement with the International Mercantile Marine Company, which is headed by the American millionaire and very famous banker J.P. Morgan. And he makes an agreement with Mr. Morgan that the White Star Line will be purchased for $50 million payable in cash.
Wow.
So now, White Star Line is owned under what we're going to refer to as the IMM Group. And if you're wondering why the name J.P. Morgan sounds familiar, it's because he also owned U.S. Steel, General Electric, as well as J.P. Morgan Chase & Company.
Which is who they're still with us today.
Yes,
I mean,
they are.
All those. I mean, that's amazing.
So there's an author who had said that technically Titanic may have been, or the White Star Line may have been like a British company, but it was really American. So after the acquisition, Ismay is named president of the IMM Group while also maintaining his chairmanship of the White Star Line. Ready for player number two?
Player number two? Sure. You know what? You're going to have to say his
Okay,
name, and
sorry.
I'll talk about the rest.
Okay, so Lord Pirret is also the other way that you can read his title, is the Right Honorable Viscount William James Peary.
Okay, we'll just call him Lord Peary.
Lord
How's that?
Peary is easier.
Okay. He was the controlling director of Harland and Wolff Shipyard, a preeminent shipbuilding company operated out of Belfast, Ireland. So Harland and Wolff constructed all of the White Star Line vessels, and Lord Peary, on behalf of Harland and Wolff, maintained a financial interest in the IMM group.
So we may only be talking about player 1, player 2, but let's be real. JP Morgan is kind of that background player 3. So these 3 men are leaders of the international shipping industry with intertwined financial interests. So we're going to head back to our gentlemen enjoying their wine.
Well, before we get there, just to let you all know out there that we actually have a graph, or is actually
I'd call it maybe a flow chart.
Yeah, like a little flow chart, and I'm going to attempt to get up in the notes on the website so you can see the interrelation between the IMM, Harland Wolff, the White Star Line, the way they fight. Kind of get a visual, because sometimes when there's multiple players, it's easier to see it when you have a visual picture.
And for me, I'm such a visual learner, and so to be able to put it in there really helped me, because I had to read that over and over again to figure it out.
I agree.
So now we've got Lord Peary and Ismay. They're hanging out. They're enjoying their wine. And what is the topic of conversation? There is a rival passenger line, which is called the Cunard Line. And they have a newfound popularity in the newspapers. Their flagship, the Mauretania, had earned the Blue Rye Band in 1907, which is creating a lot of publicity for them. Which the Blue Rye Band, it's not an actual physical trophy, it's more like a metaphorical rank, but it distinguishes the holder as the fastest and most prestigious vessel. And Ismay was very concerned that this increased publicity in the newspapers for the Cunard Line would attract passengers away from his beloved White Star Line, and there was a fortune in potential earnings that are at stake.
Well, I can imagine. I mean, this was the passenger line service was really ramping up, and the immigrants were coming across. So I would imagine
You're just winning with the transitions,
I'm
man.
sorry,
You're winning.
Yeah, there was a lot going on at that time. A lot of change going on.
There really was. So before steamships, the only way to cross the Atlantic had been by they call it a sailing packet, which I had to look up. So it's kind of picture Pirates of the Caribbean, wooden ship, lots of white sails.
Lots of scurvy.
Yeah.
Rats,
maybe.
rum.
Maybe. You know what? Maybe. But it's described as being slow, cramped, and unpredictable. A crossing could take as much as a month. So with the invention of the steamship, it changed the travel experience. The speed and reliability of the new steamships meant a great surge in transatlantic travel, with profits further fattened by the growing immigrant trade and generous mail contracts.
Oh.
And that's from Walter Lord, is that quote.
Wow.
So, Dad, you want to go over the immigration to America?
Yeah, because what is interesting at that point in time that immigration to America was exponentially growing, and back in the major wave of immigration in the 1800s was between 1880 and 1920. More than 20 million immigrants arrived, mostly from southern, eastern, and central Europe. And between 1845 and 1849, the Great Irish Famine led to more than 2 million people immigrating from Ireland.
I read somewhere it was half of Ireland's population that left.
Well,
half.
I mean, that famine was devastating. So, I mean, to leave because there's no food, I certainly can. Yeah, I can understand that.
Absolutely. And then between 1820 and 1860, the Irish accounted for 1/3 of all the immigrants to the United States.
Wow. And we certainly are a country of immigrants.
Yes,
so
we are.
That's what makes the United States great.
In 1907, U.S. immigration peaked with 1.3 million people entering the country through Ellis Island alone.
Wow. That's a lot of people.
So now imagine having that amount of people times however much the fare would be to come from Europe just to America. That's not even counting anybody going from America to Europe on vacation.
Oh, because it would have had to have had passengers going both directions. You would
Absolutely.
think.
So by 1873, there's 11 major passenger lines that are competing to attract this business, and there's some high stakes. So if you remember in the very first episode, McCluskey, we're talking about the anatomy of the Titanic, the gentleman who had access to all the archival evidence. He was like a 5th generation Harland and Wolff employee.
Yes.
He says that the race was on to produce ever larger and faster liners than previously constructed.
Yeah, I can see why. I mean, yeah, if you've got something that's bigger, better, faster than the next guy, that's you're certainly going to draw you away from it's going to make it more difficult to keep your clientele.
And Ismay was worried about exactly that. He was very concerned with this preoccupation with the newer, sleeker, faster ships would make the White Star Line obsolete. It was not White Star Line policy to participate in, we considered, the vulgar competition of the fastest Atlantic crossing and that blue rye band trophy. Instead, the White Star Line's reputation was built on excellence of service and elegant, luxurious surroundings. So if the White Star Line was not going to engage in the fastest crossing fad, how was he going to solidify their position amongst the transatlantic passenger lines? They needed a different way in which they could be considered the most prestigious.
So on this night when they're talking, when they have their wine and their cheese and they're discussing this, so on that night, what did they come up with?
A plan.
A plan.
They've got a plan. So they decide to attract the wealthier passengers and thus gaining control of the upper end of the transatlantic passenger market, the White Star Line would create the largest, the most luxurious ships with the finest materials and craftsmanship available. So
Well, I'd sign up for that.
I mean, sounds great to me.
Yeah.
He talked about a transatlantic voyage being something to savor. You're not just going from A to B. This is part of your vacation.
Oh,
is
yes.
getting over there.
Yes, the pictures I've seen, it was beautiful.
Mother of pearl inlay. I mean, stunning. So the story goes, when Lord Pirret inquired as to the length of the ship, which is going to affect how stable it is, that sort of thing, Ismay replied, glass of wine still in hand, build me a stable ship that will not disturb the sentiment in these fine wines.
That'd be one fine wine and one big ship.
Very large ship. So because the White Star Line had been acquired by the IMM group, Ismay had access to almost unlimited funds to achieve this goal. J.P. Morgan enthusiastically supported the plan, instructing Ismay, quote, get me the finest vessels afloat.
Wow. I mean, the amount of money that it took to build that at today's dollars, my goodness. That was something. And yeah, he would need to have unlimited funds.
I want to say it was done on a contract plus, something like that, where there was a contract that was drawn up, but anything that went over, they were of course responsible for that as well. So the Harland and Wolff basically got this blank check in essence to be able to build these ships.
Oh my goodness. You can build anything with a blank check.
Right? So I want to go over what makes the Titanic notable.
Yes, it is at 46,328 tons. It is the largest ship in the world. It's only slightly larger than the sister ship Olympic, but 50% larger than any other liner afloat at that time.
And just 1 second. So she is 892 feet long and 92 feet wide at her fattest point.
Wow.
That is a ginormous vessel.
That is. And the tonnage, I mean, that's what's going to displace water. That's what's going to make it stable. That is huge. I mean, it is, I didn't realize that it was that large. I did not know that. So anyway, this size led to many rumors and legends. So some people said there was a golf course on board.
Which would be amazing.
Oh, I would be.
I would.
mean, yeah, I'd sign up for a golf course.
Right there. Although, can you imagine hitting into a water feature on it?
Well, there'd be a big old water feature all the way around.
You're not getting that ball back.
There's also a rumor that they carried herd of dairy cows for fresh milk. So, yeah. I mean, I guess I don't know where that one came from because you certainly would have to see them, smell them, or whatever. I don't know.
I don't know, but
that's a strange one.
I find that just whimsical as heck.
Yeah.
I think it's adorable.
So the Olympic had already been in service for a year by the time of Titanic's maiden voyage. So the challenge for the White Star Line was how to make the Titanic seem novel and new when the two ships were structurally the same.
So they found a way where they had two new amenities that required very little structural change. One was a set of special staterooms that were more lavish than any on the Olympic that were installed on B deck. Most of these rooms were interconnecting. They could be turned into suites of any size. They were decorated in different period styles like Regency, and two of the suites even had private promenade decks that were done in that half-timbered Tudor style. The other attraction was the Café Parisien, which I don't know if that's actually how I pronounce that, but it was a first-class dining attraction. It was bright, airy, and decorated like a French sidewalk cafe. It had genuine French waiters, although I have actually seen in another place that they were actually Italian. So,
But they spoke French?
maybe. I'm gonna throw it out there. I've seen it two different ways, that it's genuine French or that it was Italian.
Well, they were definitely, so they were basically going after money here. They're going after the very high end customers.
Absolutely.
So, but you had first class, second class, and third class.
Which this was one of the first times it was referred to as third class. Usually it's first class, second class steerage. And so they called them third class.
And they elevated them.
Nice. They had their own promenade area. They had these kind of general areas. The cabins were actually very nice. So to be even third class on the Titanic was far and away better than anything else you could do on a different liner.
So when you're talking about these amenities, whether they're real or whether they were rumor, there was a lot of publicity and a lot of excitement for the Titanic. So through all of this media, or the hype and the information that went out before her maiden voyage, they basically said Ismay, he successfully captured the imagination of the world and changed the script regarding luxury transportation. So
absolutely,
this is in people's minds of, wow, this is. I mean, I would have loved to have been on that. I mean,
absolutely,
yeah.
So now the Cunard line, they may have won that Blue Riband in 1907, but by 1910, 1911. The White Star Line has captured, as you said, the public's imagination, their excitement. People are following very actively in the news for the next update. So they start announcing in the news that there are going to be two ships built that are going to compete with the Lusitania and the Mauretania, which, can you imagine today if a company were to say, oh, we're going to do this and it's going to get that other guy?
Yeah, well, I think today that there is some of that, but it's more subtle.
I would agree.
But you're right. But yeah, I mean, just to come right out and say, I'm going to build this and it's going to kick that one to the curb.
Out of the water. And then they would announce, a couple months later, they would announce the name. A couple months later, they would announce that they're building the hull. And so everyone's kind of watching Olympic and Titanic get built through newspapers. And so one of the things I really want to talk about before we get into the primary source documentation, I think it's crucial to establish, is this idea that the Titanic was advertised as unsinkable. The White Star Line does not say this in their ads or their promotions. Their slogan is the largest and finest steamers in the world. So where did this impression come from? The Irish News and Belfast Morning News ran a story on June the 1st, 1911, which is the day after Titanic launched. Now note, that's not her day sailing. Her voyage, that's not her voyage.
It's not the maiden voyage.
No. This is just her coming out of the slip at the Harland and Wolff shipyards. There's, yay, she's
break the champagne and off she goes.
So in the news, they described both the launching ceremony and the ship itself, which included a detailed description of the 16 watertight compartments with electronically controlled doors that connected those watertight compartments. In the newspaper, it stated, quote, "In the event of an accident or at any time when it may be considered advisable, the captain can, by simply moving an electric switch, instantly close the doors throughout, practically making the vessel unsinkable." And then shortly thereafter, I want to say it was in the same month, it was very shortly thereafter, there was a prestigious magazine called Shipbuilder, which ran an article praising the, quote, miracle doors, which is, that's Walter Lord's little phrase, not the articles, just to be clear. And it described the mechanisms involved and concluded that, quote, by merely flicking a switch on the bridge, they made the ship practically unsinkable. Practically. However, well, two things. Number one, this is a gross oversimplification. Only 12 doors at the very bottom of the ship could be closed electronically from the bridge. The rest, which was about 20 to 30, had to be closed by hand. And on the night of the disaster, some were closed while some were not. Some were closed and then reopened to make it easier to use the pumps. So just
Right.
Just so you're
So,
aware.
so people are hearing this information and they're saying they remember the unsinkable part, but they're
Yeah.
not really
That
tuning or honing in
practically.
on the practically.
Yeah,
Yeah.
but there's some quotes about the unsinkable nature of modern ships. I think it's crucial to be able to understand the passenger's mindset on the night of the disaster. So Captain E.J. Smith, who is the captain of the Titanic, but he made this quote in 1906, so well before her idea was even conceived. He said, "I cannot imagine any condition which would cause the ship to founder. I cannot conceive of any vital disaster happening to this vessel," which was the Adriatic. Modern shipbuilding has gone beyond that.
Oh, wow. So they're saying that modern shipbuilding is basically is advanced when it comes to safety and advanced when it comes to can't you're not gonna sink basically.
Well, and you see the one for Arthur Henry Roston? If you want to share that one with us.
Yeah, Arthur Henry Roston was the captain of the Carpathia, and he testified during U.S. Senate investigation that the ships are built nowadays to be practically unsinkable, and each ship is supposed to be a lifeboat in itself. These ships are supposed to be built, and the naval architects say they are unsinkable under certain conditions. So that I find amazing because what he's saying is that they are being built in design and production to be practically unsinkable, be a lifeboat unto itself. But not only that, the architects or the governing, they're not regulatory, but I guess there would be a certain structure to
But, I mean, the people that literally built
that are
this.
building. They're the ones who
Yeah.
are designing them. They're saying they're unsinkable under certain conditions. Once again, under certain conditions.
But what really stuck out to me, because he made that quote in the Senate investigation after the fact, after the sinking. So when he's being asked questions about, the quote, unsinkable nature of Titanic, he speaks up that this isn't just about Titanic. This is about the industry as a whole. And so I think there is kind of this attitude looking back that, Titanic was advertised as unsinkable. It actually is a bigger problem than that. It was the hubris of the entire industry.
Wow.
There's a couple other quotes that happened during the Senate investigation. Actually, this one happened before they actually found out she sunk. So this is Philip Franklin, who's the vice president of the White Star Line, in a statement he made responding to the early reports that the Titanic had sunk. Quote, "We place absolute confidence in the Titanic. We believe that the boat is unsinkable." And clarified later on in the day that even if an accident had happened, Titanic would remain afloat for 2 to 3 days.
I find that amazing that they can make that statement when clearly the way it was designed, the way it was built, if they breached more, I believe it was than five chambers, it would sink.
Well,
So how can you? I don't understand how they can say it can stay afloat for 2 to 3 days.
Well, it's interesting because the 2 to 3 day thing actually pops up a couple different times. I think that Beasley makes a comment about it that somebody else was told 2 to 3 days. So there's these ideas that seem to, and that's where you've got to be very careful because sometimes with testimony, it can be. Not everybody's going to read the same magazines. Not everybody's going to read the same newspaper articles. So just because it appears in one newspaper article does not mean that this is a commonly held belief held by all persons. However, this idea that ships at this time were completely safe, that ships that were damaged would not sink, that it would float for 2 or 3 days. These do seem to have been held by British persons, by American persons, by leaders of the industry, by normal people just there to go home. So I think it's important to talk about this. It is not a myth. It is not one of those rumors that has come about after the fact to make the story more exciting. It is a fact, and it's a crucial fact.
But I just find it once again. But you're talking architects. You're talking
Yes.
the people that design
That you would trust.
Yes, and for them to be able to for this mindset to be prevalent or seem to be prevalent in people in the industry back then. When in clearly in engineering terms, engineering is engineering. I mean, it is the way that they designed the Titanic. There were certain things about it that if it went beyond those design criteria, it would sink. So now maybe it was just a ploy for them to get people to use use the White Star Line and the Titanic rather than the other guy. So because in reality, it was not unsinkable. It did sink and they knew that from the get-go. I mean, because any engineer would know there's certain
Well, you know what it
things.
reminds me of is the great line that they have in the movie Titanic, where oh gosh, it's not Ismay, it's Andrews, where Ismay goes, "But this ship cannot sink." He goes, "She's made of iron, sir. I assure you she can." Which that's my horrible
Yes.
Irish accent that I will never do again.
Yes.
But it's true. She's made
Yes.
of iron.
Made
She
of
can
iron.
sink.
That's right. If you compromise the integrity of the design, she will sink. So I just see this as just a way of hyping this fight they had between the different lines for the passengers to get their attention, to get them to get the people to come and use their
I'm going to
ship.
respectfully disagree. You've got the Captain Johnson of the American liner, St. Paul, who declared it was practically impossible for the Titanic to sink because her 15 bulkheads would keep her afloat indefinitely. He's not even going for 2 to 3 days, indefinitely.
Well, he was wrong.
When he made that comment, she had already been at the bottom of the sea for 12 hours,
Wow.
according to Walter Lord.
Right. Yeah, no, just my point is that they, in engineering, there are definites.
Yes.
That's all. That's
Yes.
all I'm saying. Just like I said, the
Absolutely.
ship's made of iron, okay? You breach enough, you get enough holes in the hull, it will sink to the bottom of the ocean. So I just think there was just a lot of hype going on that
Yes.
got people's attention, and it succeeded because several of the memoirs that I have read through, you could see that people were totally amazed that it was sinking.
Yes.
An unsinkable ship can't sink.
Yes.
So there was a definite mindset of the passengers on board that this could not have happened even when it was happening. I believe.
Things are happening before their very eyes. Water's coming up over the bow. There's one where Beasley's walking down the stairs and he can't place his feet quite right because she's listing to the side. And he still is not, at no point is he like, "Oh my gosh, the ship is sinking, I need to get off." He's just like, "Huh, that's strange."
Right. Yeah, exactly. So I think sometimes our expectations drive the way that we look at a circumstance, and it colors the way we see it. And
Absolutely.
at first you don't see it, but then it sets in. It's like we'll get into about the rockets and those type of things where certain things happen that people realized, oh my goodness, this ship is sinking.
Yes.
But to overcome that, the advertising, the hype, the excitement, and then to be in that situation to realize that, my life is, I could lose my life within the next few hours. I can't even fathom that. I can't even imagine what that must have been like for those people that were there that night. So anyway, just very interesting to me what you have shared with me so far and the things that I'm learning from your research. So I just didn't. I didn't realize that back then they thought they were so far advanced.
It was I would call it an optimistic and a naive time. Because if you think about it, 1912, we have not had World War I. We have not had the Great Depression.
Oh, that's true.
We are, the Queen Victoria has passed in 1901. I mean, really, I was trying to think. I'm like, what's the last disaster that really, truly happened in America? I mean, America had just come through the Civil War, but that was still the 1860s.
60s. Right.
So
Yeah,
it was a very optimistic time.
Yes. Well, and the turn of the century, and you had the industry. You had a lot of industry going on, and like you talked, the U.S. Steel, railroads, a lot's going on in the country. And this real feeling of we're coming into our own, more or less.
Yes.
And
prosperity,
yeah.
much prosperity.
Yes. Yes.
It was just this feeling of limitless potential.
Yes. So it's and actually it's kind of just the thought of that and thinking about when something like that, the hype that led to just the disillusionment or the loss of life from going from something unsinkable to a massive loss of life is just. It's just such a horrible tragedy, especially for the people that were living that lost their lives and went through that because they had such a different mindset.
I
going
believe
into
it's Thayer that says, Jack Thayer, which was a passenger on the Titanic. He was 17 years old when he went on the Titanic. He survived, as did his mother, but his father died in the tragedy. And he says that for him, the world as we know it began April 15th, 1912.
Wow. That would have been such a mental mind change of thought for them that went through that, because to go from something that can't happen, then it happens to them, that would really be very difficult to go through. We've experienced, as a country, we experienced some, when it comes to like 9/11, and I know of some people that was very hard on, well, especially the people in New York, but in California, I had friends, so it was very difficult for them.
Yeah.
So there have been some things that we as a country have gone through. I was encouraged to see that the Senate hearings in the United States started very quickly after this. So that was to see that they wanted to get down to the bottom of it. So, and we'll be talking more about that, about passengers in the coming episodes. So, this is just it is a real eye opener for me. Just looking at what I've experienced in my life, and just kind of thinking about that process of, as a culture, the mindset where we are and where we think we are, and then something happens and it changes. So,
Rome thought she'd last forever too. All right. So we're going to wrap up this episode.
All right.
We have so much more to talk to you. So next time we're going to talk about the passengers. We're going to listen to them. We're going to listen to their words and their stories. We're going to follow them through as they experience the Titanic in her last day on Earth.
Well, thank you, everyone, for joining us, and looking forward to our next time we can be together.
Absolutely. Until then, I'm Courtney.
I'm Brian.
And this is The Primary Nerd.